guest hasn't showed up yet, and because it's already 4, I want to start a podcast. So I'm just going to start anyway on the topic of what we're going to talk about, and if he shows up, it'll be able to roll seamlessly in, and if he doesn't, it'll be a solo rant. But the book is called The Q Loophole by journalist, investigative journalist George Webb. He came on here a couple weeks ago. And the Q loophole, as he points out in the opening sentences of his book, has nothing to do with the conspiracy theory QAnon, but rather the very real Q clearance under the DOE, the Department of Energy, which is the highest security clearance in the DOE. And just so I don't butcher it, let me get the exact wording up right now. And it is Q clearance of the DOE is the top of security clearances for all restricted data within, or as defined by the Atomic Energy Act of 1954. So it's A-bombs, chemical weapons, tippy top kind of movie shit. And he calls the Q loophole how we brought more than just than amount of Nazis that were originally planned. If you, it's an odd sentence, but Operation Paperclip was, as I've beat to death on this podcast, the bringing back to the United States of, and I'm using the new camera, so I gotta sit back a little more, which is weird because I like to get right up in front and yell, but in order to get the full shot in, I kind of gotta sit back like this, which I don't like. I like to fucking yell. Whatever. Fuck it, do it live. We're gonna do it this way. Sorry everybody, technical difficulties. But whoever's listening to this podcast is like, Jesus Christ, dude, get your life together. So we brought back a ton of Nazis, namely Werner von Braun, the head of the Apollo moon program, who was an engineer, and it's widely disputed whether or not whether he was just drafted into the Wehrmacht and that was some nice pronunciation there. You see that? The Wehrmacht? I don't know if I can do it again. But because a lot of soldiers were just drafted in, but I believe there was eventually revelation showing that he joined the SS like way before it was even like a war where people were being drafted left and right. It gets a little hairy. But when it does come to that rarefied air of pitting nations against each other, I think a lot of stuff is often, as I believe it was a Pentagon official said, like right after the war, we need to stop beating a dead Nazi horse, saying that by no means did it mean let bygones be bygones, so much as it was like Hitler iced himself, we've bombed the Reich into oblivion, we just nuked Japan. Now we need to start preparing for eventual confrontation with the Soviet Union. And so because of that, we need to bring back these Nazis. Ideally, sure, we'd kill them all. Ideally, though, or not, I don't know. Let's walk that statement back. It was, these guys have intellect. It was, well, first and foremost, we know the Soviets got about 1/3 of them. I think they kind of went to they got them, I believe some members of the Red Army, if I'm recalling correctly, went into like whatever main city a lot of them were in, and got them like piss drunk or something, and then woke them up at like 2 a.m, still drunk, like blacked out, and got them and their families and put them on trains. Some beautiful irony there, or some poetic, maybe not beautiful. No human suffering is great. Brought them back to the Soviet Union. And they went to basically the Soviet equivalent of Area 51, which I can never remember the name of. And so let's pretend that didn't happen. Let's pretend that none of them were captured by the Soviets. And let's say we somehow got all of them in one room, just hypothetically. Ideally, this is how I originally saw it, was if we had them all in one room, we just would have shot them all dead and no one would have got them and we could have killed the Nazis. But we couldn't do that because in this thought experiment. At least one of them escaped and went to the Soviet Union, so now the Soviets were going to be able to get the brain power, which was a huge thing. It wasn't enough that we got the blueprints and the documents and even the pieces of the V2s from Nordhausen. We needed the brains on how to put these things together, which you can see now. I mean, technically, we don't have the schematics on how to build the F1 engines from the Saturn V. And it's because the labor and the skilled labor and the kind of, I might be speaking out of turn, but kind of like on-the-fly, impromptu kind of fixes they made was so niche and so narrowly defined that that we couldn't build them today. It was just, so it's not enough that you have the blueprints. Sometimes you just need the brain behind it, right? Like if you could have Beethoven alive today, I mean, if we had Shakespeare alive today, like, would we be able to, like, I'm sure there is things in his writing that we never would have guessed. Fucking Shakespeare comes back, he's just a racist alcoholic, like, pedophile. He's just like, my work means nothing, it's just all code. And we're like, oh no. So we wanted to bring him, and that was a big thing early on. But so let's just say in this thought experiment, there's 100 of them. There's thousands and thousands. Let's just say there's 100 of them. We have them all in one room during Operation Alsace, which was our intelligence, Alsace. Is that related to, was it Alsace and Lorraine? Is that World War I? Was that Otto von Bismarck? I don't fucking remember. It was during our intelligence, the spoils of war go to the victors. When we raided Germany, what was the quote? And happy hunting to you all. Get fucking everything. Which was, I mean, it's the modern day, like, you know, you go in, you ice the Al-Qaeda commander, and then you take all the hard drives. It was the 1945 equivalent of that. And so let's say there was just 100 of them. They're all in one room. At least one escaped and went to the Soviets. Now it wasn't enough that we had the blueprints and we could just shoot them all. One of them escaped to the Soviets, meaning that the Soviets now had a leg up on us, meaning that we needed now to at least keep one of them. And because of that, it then became everyone can get the blueprints, we can find copies, we can make copies. Now it's about getting the minds, getting the living, working minds. These guys that have been studying this stuff for 30, 40, 50 years. These things that you can't just create out of nothing. These experienced engineers and brilliant German, I guess, physicists or rocket scientists, or whatever the fuck it is. And so we had to bring them back to fight the Soviets. And now I could be just talking about this through the American lens, because I'm pretty sure we started snagging them first before the Soviets. So we couldn't even say, well, we were going to kill them all, but then the Russians got one, so we had to get one too. I don't think that was even the case. I think maybe you could argue preemptively, we were like, let's take some of them back, because what if we kill them all and then in 2 years we find out the Soviets got one? Like, we can't know for sure that we got them all. But, you know, I think I'm being too generous with the American mindset. I don't think it was some, like, our hands are tied. I think it was pretty much like, this is intel, the war's over, they're as good as dead. We had them in these, like, makeshift jails and shit, I think called, like, Ashcan. I think that was one of them, Ashcan. It was something like that. Somewhere in Europe. And it was like a 5-star hotel, but it was, like, surrounded with, like, double razor wire, had turrets and snipers. It was right after Germany surrendered. Like, in my mind at least, we kind of go from Germany surrendering to the Pacific. There is still some crazy fucking shit happening, like, right after Germany surrendered in Europe. But yeah, we were holding these Nazis in this 5-star hotel or 4-star hotel or whatever, and apparently they were just total divas. They were Annie Jacobson's Operation Paperclip. She writes all about it. Apparently they were total divas. They were was it Goering, or one of them was always painting his nails red, and they would get mad at each other because, like, one would take really long showers or something. One of them apparently would always masturbate in the bathtub. Like, And another one of them was just obsessed with just like Aryan features, would spend all day just looking in the mirror. I mean, these guys were, read Annie Jacobson's Operation Paperclip. You will never realize just how much these guys were just children. And that's not to say that they're not accountable for what they did. They were very sober-minded and knew what they did. They're fucking psychopaths, and I it's disgusting we brought them back here. I also understand it. They're total children, though. Like, the point is we brought back a lot of them, and early on it was very like, first we were discovering like the caches of like blueprints and rocket parts and stuff, and you know, we always kind of hear, we see it in Band of Brothers and shit, like we always hear about like the liberation of like Dachau or like Auschwitz or Bergen-Belsen, Chelmno, Auschwitz-Birkenau, was it Slovenor? It's just, they're all fucking evil. And but we don't hear a lot about the liberation of Nordhausen, which was in, I think, was it the Harz or the Harz Mountain, which is where the Brothers Grimm, all of their stories take place in those like German mountains, and it is like real life, like terror. Like there was a concentration camp there, like built into the mountains, but it's not as well known because it was called Nordhausen. It was built into the mountains. It wasn't the normal kind of imagery you think, the gray sky, the middle of the field, the barbed wire fences. It was a factory inside of a mountain that was safe from being bombed, or couldn't have been bombed. It was protected by a mountain, much like NORAD. But it's where they would, I think Annie Jacobson says, slaves and raw materials went in, bodies and V2s came out. It's just some dark shit, but yeah, so we brought a lot of them back, but early on we were just getting the blueprints and the pieces from places like Nordhausen, and we quickly learned that I think there was how was it? It was I think several of them, including von Braun and maybe Arthur Rudolph, were staying up in like they're up in one of those, not quite the Eagle's Nest, but something like that. And they actually came down and like surrendered to the Americans, and they were like, it's actually kind of eerily similar to Inglourious Bastards. Like, I am your prisoner. Apparently von Braun came down and was just like smoking a cigarette, wearing like aviators, and was like, I would like to talk to Ike. And they were like, the fuck? And it was just like M1 Grants pointed at him. But he was just, I mean, the egos were just I mean, they were gods in the Reich. So, I mean, they really looked at the soldiers. They're like, no. And they were insulted if they had to talk to anyone less. The Americans and the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, played on that. And they were like, all right, go get a jet. And again, it's the bigger picture, which, I mean, that's a whole nother episode for another time. Mitzi and I went into it, was that yesterday? 2 days ago? No, Dr. Halpeck was just 2 days ago. Went into the whole greater good, but not important. The Americans played on that they would open up if someone with like ribbons and medals came and talked to them. You can start to kind of see why the Reich fell apart, aside from the fact that Hitler was doing meth and Eucadol in his bunker. But a lot of it was based on favoritism and cronyism, which kind of similar to right now. But one of the things they would do is when there was one soldier who had been studying Nazi propaganda films, or an OSS agent back in the United States, studying them, like watching their films so many times that he could like recite them, and like he knew facial features and stuff, because right when the soldiers, when they would try to slip into like the crowds of just the Wehrmacht, a lot of them would you know, they would get rid of all their badges and stuff, they'd change their haircut, they'd do whatever, they'd shave the mustaches, they do all sorts of shit to blend in. And so this guy, who I think was part of a team, was tasked with like learning all this shit, learning their little mannerisms, how they spoke, the speeches they gave. And you know, Heinrich Himmler, Rudolf Hess, Arthur Rudolph, Adolf Eichmann, Mengele, von Braun, Otto Skorzeny, Reinhard Gehlen, all the other fucking evil ones. Murring, not Murring, or Goering, Goebbels. The point is he learned all about them, and so when he went to I think Ashcan and saw them, they didn't know who he was. This is just another GI. He knew who they were, and instead of sitting them down and interrogating them, what one of them asked him was, I think it was the one with the painted fingernails. He's like, "We have been treated so poorly here." Again, the irony of like them slaughtering 6 million in these concentration camps in the middle of fucking nowhere is just. But they're like, "We're being treated so poorly here. Like, we are not being given like enough cigarettes. Like, you know, we're only getting this much brandy a night. Like, my pillows have not been changed once. Like." And what he said to this OSS officer was, "Are you here to see about our accommodations or about like the Geneva Conventions?" But again, it's just fucking insane. And the dude, being intelligent, just said, "Yes, I am." And what he found was, he's like, "Tell me about your grievances." As the Nazis would tell him this, what they loved doing was gossiping, and they loved selling each other out. That's the thing, is they'd say like, "Hey, look, like I didn't do anything. I designed the rockets, but see that guy 2 halls down?" They would say like, "You should kill him," straight up. But they would all say it about each other. The whole place is bugged. Everything, every tree, they would put him in cars and black out the windows, and they'd drive him like around the same town for 3 hours, and they'd take him out in a field and be like, "You're at this resort," and all the Nazis would be like, "We're at a resort now." Like, we got, you know, like wrapping a bottle of water in Fiji. It was just superficial, but these fucking retarded crowds fell for it. But this is so the guy would get him pillows or like more soap or lather or like a fresh razor or something. And we're going way off topic. The point is we found that we had to bring him back. And just like when he opens the door and he sees the Nazi, instead of shooting him in the face, instead he says, "Yes, I am here to see about your provisions and caretaking." Let me check the email. Do I have the wrong day and time? No response, man. Guess not. So instead of just opening the door and shooting him, it was, you know, let's see. It's like when we cracked the Enigma, was it? We couldn't act on the fact that we cracked the Enigma. It's parallel construction. You can't, like Trump tweeting a picture from one of our satellites at the Iranian base, and it was like, no, it's not new that we have satellites, but it's like you're supposed to like purposely like compress the images so they don't know the resolution, and you can't burn your sources and methods, and because it can lead to a greater good. So like with the Enigma code, we now knew when they were going to attack Allied Liberty ships or you know, bomb supply routes or something. But if we started preventing all those attacks and nipping them in the bud, sure, it's great when we save American lives, but what the Nazis are going to realize is, oh, they've got us figured out. Change the cipher. We got to change the encryption. And then maybe you blocked 10 attacks that would have saved 1,000 American lives. But now the Nazis have went back into the shadows, made a deeper encryption, and now they're going to be able to kill another 100,000 Americans. Versus if you let these 10 attacks go through, the Nazis, they're going to think they're still hiding in the shadows. But then we can map the network even deeper. Then we can cut them off, and now we can save 99,000 lives. It's a cold calculus, and it's I don't make those decisions clearly. Not that anyone was confused whether or not me sitting in my makeshift anechoic chamber in an Alex Jones hoodie thought otherwise. But so the idea was like, so what was the importance of the rockets? Like why do we really need the Nazis that much? Like, is this something? Apparently, we thought that the Nazis were something like 20 years ahead of our best efforts at rocketry. So whereas we aced the atomic bomb, and the Germans didn't even really get past like heavy water, deuterium water. The inverse was true for rockets. They had we had nothing like this, and we legitimately thought they were like 20 years ahead of where we were. And we knew it was not going to be long before the Soviets detonated an atomic bomb, and it was even sooner than that because they had spies within the Manhattan Project. Klaus Fuchs and was it the Rosenbergs? I know Klaus Fuchs was one of them, who came from MI6, I think, who himself was an agent to the. The point is kind of like the meta of video games. They just kind of zoomed out enough, so it was like, what's the big picture? The big picture is, well, now with A-bombs, with massive waves of bombers, one always got through. So you knew you were going to lose a lot. You just threw them all at them. Well, now with A-bombs instead of dumb bombs, now the fact that only one got through meant something a lot different. It used to be one got through, and say you'd hit a couple of the targets because you really just kind of dumping bombs out the back. Versus an A-bomb, only one needs to get through. It'd be like if I had an Olympic swimming pool of gasoline, and like 100 of you listeners were 100 yards away, and you all had flaming arrows, and you shot them at me, and like I had a wall of sprinklers. I would get a lot of them. Some of yours would get through. Now, pre-A-bomb, it wasn't a pool of gasoline. It was individual piles of hay separated by dirt. You could say that those were different warehouses, different factories, different whatever. You'd get a couple of them. The more you got through, the better. You're always going to get at least one. I'm never going to stop 100%. It's diminishing returns. I can't get a wall of water. The amount of effort that would go into it would be resources better spent somewhere else. Inversely, you're never going to get 100% through. You can't. Again, it's diminishing returns. You might miss the haystack, you might not, but that's the reason why you throw 100 flaming arrows at the haystack separated by dirt, unflammable dirt, that you might hit one of them. Well, now with the A-bomb, it was, well, let's just use the same analogy. It's the same haystacks, but the entire thing is just coated with gasoline. The dirt is soaked with gasoline. It's all one thing. You just gotta hit one. And the A-bomb being, you just have to get one through, and the CEP, the circular error probable, the radius of the blast wave, the thermal pulse, the radiation, the shock wave, it's going to destroy all of it. So that was like the big picture. It wasn't columns of tanks. I mean, that all was tanks, D-Day invasions, but it shifted entirely to the new thing was, we have an A-bomb. Like, we can now exert so much power with just one B-29. Excuse me. This is the tripod for the new camera. Obviously, I'm not using it. Not important. So, when you zoom out and look at all of it, it was now you just need one to get through, right? So let's break it down. Is it amphibious invasions? Is it using Patton's inflatable tanks? Is it no? Is it the OSS? Is it sabotage? Is it surveillance? Is it reconnaissance? The big picture, the thing that ended the war, the thing that offset the mainland invasion of Japan, was one plane with one bomb. Now there are tailors, there are scientific planes, but it changes, the dynamic changes entirely, right? Like right now, I do an episode every day. I have a lot of repeat guests. I'm always getting different guests. I never know if they're going to work. I never know if the guests are going to show up. I never know if it's going to be a good episode. But I'm trying to build this thing up versus like maybe you get to a Joe Rogan level. Now, granted, he's a bad example because he does them every day. But let's say Rogan didn't. Let's say he did one episode a month, but it was just a killer episode. It was with President Biden, or it was with Michael Jordan and fucking Tommy Chong or whatever. Like, the dynamic changes entirely. And as we had, didn't we, if you had something like 8 million, I want to say that's correct, from Richard Rhodes's Dark Sun, we had something like 8 million servicemen overseas. It changes the supply lines, the logistics entirely. And Eisenhower saw that as the logistician magician. Did I just make that up? I think I did. Shout out Ike. Is you now need such a small thing to enact such a large amount of force that could end a fucking war. I mean, we're going island hopping from Iwo Jima to Guadalcanal to Okinawa to I always fuck this up, Peleliu. It changes so much, right? It's the dumb bombs versus the JDAM. It's the covering fire versus the computer-guided sniper rifle. It changes entirely. Now, what does this have to do with the Q loophole? Shut the fuck up and listen. We have the A-bomb. But now it's about, well, eventually we're not going to have this monopoly forever. The Soviets are going to figure it out as well, to where they just need one plane to get through. So now it kind of cancels out, right? The Chrysler building going up to 1,047 feet. We are at 1,000 feet now. You could say 1,000 feet is the atomic age. Well, but just like that, the Empire State Building goes up at 1,250 feet. And now it's like, it changes the game forever for a little bit until everything raises that high. And now it's just the new line, right? It's like you could, like whoever the first 6-foot NBA player was, who was the first 6'1", 6'2", to the point where now it's like you can't even get in for 30 seconds on an NBA or on a college team if you're under 6 whatever, right? So it raises the bar some, or technology. It's in 2005 you could say it has a touch screen, and that was a huge selling point. I mean, you had the iPod Touch. Now, if you tried to say, well, it's got a touchscreen, it'd be like, and the car has an air conditioner. It's like, dog, we got self-driving electric cars now. Like, you got to trade something off. You have to bring more to the table. This hard drive's got a whole 30 gigabytes. And it's like, dude, I got 100 terabytes right here. So as the whole playing field rises up to where you just need to get one flaming arrow through, what changes then? Well, two things change. Two things in the variables. So we'll break it down to its most constituent pieces. What is it? Weapon delivery system. So you have two variables. I guess you could say weapon multiplied by delivery system equals threat or whatever. You could say weapon divided by delivery time equals threat, right? And so smaller number on the bottom, bigger threat. So there's two variables you can change. You can do what? What's the first one? You can up the atomic bomb to the hydrogen bomb, which we knew was theoretically possible before World War II even ended. But before we even detonated Trinity, we knew that that was possible, which led to the hydrogen bomb, right? Edward Teller, the evil thing, Castle Bravo, Ivy Mike, the thermos bottle, all that good shit. Dark Sun by Richard M. Rhodes, fantastic book on the hydrogen bomb. But then the other thing is delivery time. Now we could get supersonic bombers, sure. We could maintain bases overseas, which we did, like bought and paid for with American lives, so we kept them. We still have them, Okinawa. But what is the next big one? What is it? Ding, ding, ding. You got it right. Fucking rockets. Rockets, which, again, it seems old now, but back then that was as high-tech as, like, orbital laser systems. Like, you have to look at it like that. You have to look at it as, like, if we found out China had a military base on the moon, we'd be like, dude, we need to be there now. Like Belt and Road Initiative, right? The 5G threat from them owning the backbone all over the third world. Like, right, we see that. And you see the Biden administration pivoting and making a stance against that with this Pacific Deterrence Initiative, right? Pacific PDI, and they call it the Build Back Better, and that's us posturing against the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which is you build a bunch of infrastructure for the third world, knowing that they can't pay it back, and you say, hey, don't worry about it, we're going to control the infrastructure, let us put a Navy port here or an Air Force base, and we'll call it even. and thus they can posture all around the globe. So we fight back with the Build Back Better initiative. And I know all of my conservative friends and listeners, even though I'm conservative myself, so you're going to say, why the fuck are you giving Biden any credit? Side note, because we're not going to get anywhere if we just going to draw lines in the sand and dig in like trench warfare, like Verdun or the Somme or whatever, and pretend that it's just going to end that way. We saw what happened with World War I. Bunch of people died, mustard gas, and Hitler came out of it. Nothing good came out of it, all right? So do have to give credit where credit's due. The Pacific Deterrence Initiative is fantastic. And the Build Back Better, I can't claim to know what all about domestically it is, but in terms of the global initiative, it is a much needed counter to the Belt and Road Initiative. That's a fact. That's just, I was arguing for it last summer, episode what was it? 161? Yeah, 161, with Brigadier General Robert Spalding, and I'll argue it now when Trump's out of office and Biden's in office. Those are objectively good things. But not important. It's rockets, all right? We need rockets. And so you can see now the importance of all of this. It's not just, let's bring back the Nazis, and it's like, dude, what the fuck? Shoot them and kill them all. Like, what are you doing? When you break it down into everything I just said, which we can say just kind of loosely, but which was highly, highly classified then, is you see just how important it is to get the rockets, right? So when you frame it like that, right? When you frame it like that and you want to hedge your bets, sure, we have the A-bomb now. We know we're not going to have a monopoly. Let's start working on the rockets. And we know the Soviets got some of the rocket scientists, so we need to get them too. When all of a sudden, World War II, where these tidal waves of iron and flesh are attacking each other, are now being, it's like having everyone vote versus like having like a democratic republic where we have representatives. All of a sudden, these mountains of men, these World War I, World War II, these columns of tanks, all of a sudden, these are all encapsulated as one plane, one bomb. The dynamic completely changes. So just like when you're looking at the tax rate on, I don't know, like the GDP or the American debt, you know, if you shift a thousandth of a decimal place on my bank interest, all right, maybe after 10 years, I'll be able to buy an additional piece of Trident gum. When you multiply it on like a COVID relief package, I mean, a millimeter here, a millimeter there, it's like a telescope looking out at a distant star. I mean, you knock a sniper rifle a little bit to the left, maybe you jump, 2 or 3 feet. Due to a star, you just like that, you're jumping the width of our solar system. So any small tweak you can make in that variable is massive, right? So that's what we need with the rockets. So you can break the rocket, that denominator variable, you can break that down into pieces. One is the technology, the actual pieces, right? The pieces of metal, the metallurgy, the science behind it. What is it? How much does it weigh? Panels, blah, blah, blah. Rocket fuel. The next is blueprints, but the next is also the minds of people who know how to use it. So instead of, right, it's great to reverse engineer a UFO, but you're going to want to capture one of those little aliens too and be like, tell me how it's done, right? I don't know why the guy interrogating a member of another species, all of a sudden it's just kind of like this like horny guy. Tell me how it's done, little gray man. Why isn't this podcast sponsored? Why don't we have ads? I don't know, Tommy. The panel's falling down. This whole studio is just a house of cards on top of a seesaw in a hurricane. It's the whole thing is just barely hanging together. But we do have a fire extinguisher. I'm not sure how that will help us, but so blueprints, actual pieces of equipment. The third is the minds, M-I-N-D-S, the minds that built them. So yes, you have to bring them back. That is a huge part of it. And it's these goddamn Nazis And I mean, it's reprehensible to think about now. Imagine like 1947. It's 2 years. I mean, 9/11 is 20 years in the rearview mirror. Imagine World War II with the concentration camps. Imagine that being 2 years in the rearview mirror. I mean, so we brought him back, and it was seen as national security. But then, as with anything, this is why we can't have nice things. There are favors within it. Early on, it's we need these Nazis, and we finally like, all right, you can bring some. Well, that very quickly spiraled into, well, we need the guys that worked under them, and we need the guys that worked under them, and to get them, now we have to make these deals where it's, all right, you got to bring their family, and it spirals off to where we had Paperclip, and I think the subsequent programs were called like Paperclip 2 or Paperclip 3. I'm not entirely sure about that. I know one of the subsequent Paperclip programs was called Accelerated Paperclip. And what started as like 10 went to 100, went to 1,500, eventually went to like 33,000. But we brought them all back here. And it was, the Soviets took them and they put them in these camps. And they didn't really get shit done, and it was so compartmentalized that they were kind of just a waste. So the Soviets, I imagine, just killed them. When we brought them back here, we found that they weren't necessarily working hard because we felt like prisoners. And if you are prisoners, you Nazis, you got to think of that variable, that denominator. This is one of those sub-variables. Well, what do they need to be happy? All right, well, you got to stay on this like compounds, but so they built them big houses. They made sure they had like catering. They made sure their kids went to school. I mean, it really was a deal with the devil. And I mean, you can only imagine how many generals or admirals like found out about this and were like, I'm going to go there now and fucking kill them. Well, why do you want to kill them? Because they killed my men. All right, well, by having them here, we are preventing a much greater number of your men being killed. So the very anger that's driving you to want to murder them is driven by the thing that having them not murdered is preventing. It's this demonic circular kind of calculus, but hey man, that's what it was. Now with George Webb's book, The Q Loophole, it's all about how did these things, because it started with rockets and then it went into chemical weapons and then it went to biological weapons, and then we started bringing in some of the Japanese from Unit 731, and then, as I believe he argues, there started to be some kind of like favors, like, all right, how about CIA is like, well, we want these, why dismantle these German intelligence networks? Let's use them. So you maintain them, Klaus, and in turn, we'll give you a spot back at the United States. You can work at a university. I mean, it's demonic, but is it for the greater good? And I don't know, I would argue yes. And that's a tough pill to swallow, and you can see what happened in the subsequent years, right? ICBMs, thermonuclear warheads, the entire Cold fucking War, right? Raven Rock, bunkers, contingency plans, kneecap, night watch, looking glass. I mean, excuse me. You can see where it all went. I don't know. I think you could argue that it was worth it. But the argument Mr. Webb makes, I believe, is that we didn't, it's almost like we opened a portal and then we didn't close it. Like, we didn't just get what we needed. We're just going to run to the liquor store real quick and just get a bottle of booze so the party can keep going. Well, while we're here, why don't we get some pizza? Why don't we, I don't know, X, Y, and Z, right? And it blossoms into this thing. What he argues were these ports, not, well, in some cases literal, but in some cases metaphorical, were these holes where Nazis came in. And how did that grow over the years? And because it's all clandestine, because it's all secret, because you can hide it behind classified TSSCI, ESI, SAP, well, then you can start doing other shit, because who watches the Watchmen? And his argument, Mr. Webb's argument in the Q Loophole was that a lot of Nazis ended up coming through here over the years. We brought them here, and then, which is kind of the case of Captain America, I forget which one, where they say that Hydra, which is the fictional but kind of representation of, you'd say, like the SS or the Ananerba Society, is that once they came back here, as he says in the movie, Zola says, he's like a beautiful virus. But once they came back here and they got up into the upper echelons of the military-industrial complex, which is what we brought them back for. Remember, not everyone knew about rockets. It was all classified. Well, when it's hidden behind a cloak, you can do whatever you want, because it's all plausibly denied. Well, eventually, human corruption, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Well, what else did they go into? And who the fuck's checking on them? Because it's a labyrinth of shadows and cloaks and secrecy and pawns and shells and umbrellas. Did they then infiltrate the highest rungs of, obviously not elected positions, but in the intelligence community, in the classified programs? Did we bring them back here and become infected? Did they seep their vines, their roots into our systems? Did the Fourth Reich rise inside of the United States? That's his argument, and it's one of my favorite conspiracies. It's the sexiest. And then you could argue now in 2021, does it matter? I mean, are they all fucking dead? Did they pass on their teachings or opinions? We don't know. But I mean, goddamn, you know, if you're undercover, do you wear your flag on your shoulder, or do you stay undercover? Maybe their biggest mistake was calling themselves the Third Reich. Like, you're supposed to have a low profile PR campaign. So what would you do? You would slip into the United States. You would hide behind the flag and the Statue of Liberty. And I mean, that's all speculation, but all the constituent pieces are fact. I mean, that's insane, and it's completely plausible. Who knows? Did they take over the Soviet Union? Was the Soviets versus the US, was that Cold War? Was that all a facade? Was it just Nazis, quote unquote, fighting Nazis? And in all reality, they were establishing the Teutonic Global Reich. I mean, I don't know. Can that get passed on? Or does the same laws of, like, a spoiled child not working hard to become the same CEO his dad is? Did Klaus Jr. go, like, I don't want to be a Nazi? And did he go to fucking, I don't know, did he go to Ohio State and just drink beer and, you know, join a fraternity? Who knows? Or was the structure built in? And it's an easy conspiracy to say, because, you know, you say, where's the evidence? And you'd say, well, there is none. You only have them coming back here with Operation Paperclip, and then it goes dark because they're hiding in the shadows. Sure. That's also sort of it's an easy conspiracy to put forward, because you've now established that there can be no evidence, and thus it could be anything. There are reptilians in the world who are covered at shape-shifting humans. Where's the evidence? Well, that's the thing, is their disguises are perfect. They look like humans. Okay, so am I one? Are you one? And if you say I'm not, how the fuck do you know? My disguise is perfect. So, yeah, but, I mean, what Zola says in Captain America is they came back here, they infiltrated the CIA, and they've been sowing conflict all over the globe ever since. I mean, have we not been doing a lot of war for a long time? Do we not have our tentacles wrapped around the world? Base Nation by David Vine. The Generals Have No Clothes by Will Arkin. You know, it's an uncomfortable thing. But yeah. Well, I mean, did I just like fuck up the date? Is he not coming? Well, hope everything's all right. Let me check his Mr. George Webb. Well, he tweeted 28 minutes ago. I mean, he's been on here before. Like, we've talked before. You can only guess there was miscommunication. Maybe I gave him the wrong date. I don't know. Point is, it's a very interesting book. It's legitimate. I mean, it's like a 10-minute read. It's kind of, I don't know if it's technically a book. It's interesting, though, but there's a lot of things that you can go down. I would go down Operation Paperclip by Annie Jacobson. That's a fantastic audiobook. It will scare the socks off you. And to learn more about, I would say read Ghost by Jefferson Morley about James Jesus Angleton, the head of CIA counterintelligence, who may or may not have helped some of these Nazis. We don't know. A book I haven't read, but I know I showed, is The Devil's Chessboard. And, yeah, but, I mean, the Silbervogel was the precursor to the X-20 Dinosaur, DYNASOAR, which was the precursor to the space shuttle. I mean, look, dude, they're a Nazi. I mean, I don't even need to bring up that kind of loose one. Werner von Braun was a fucking Nazi and got us to the moon, was the head of the Apollo program. There's photos of him just chummy it up with JFK and LeMay. I mean, you see LeMay, JFK, and von Braun all sitting there with Ray-Bans on, smoking cigars, and it's like, huh? I mean, there's like a black and white image of that, and it looks like Call of Duty's. It looks like zombies when they're all in the Pentagon, and yeah. Who knows, man? Reality stranger than fiction. Hope those panels aren't falling off. Nope, they're not. But hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting the podcast. Thanks for making my dream come true. And yeah. Take it easy, my dudes.
Recording stop.